Introduction. In the early 1970s, the United States was shaken by one of the most significant political scandals in its history, the Watergate scandal. This scandal would ultimately lead to the resignation of a sitting president, expose widespread political corruption, and change the way Americans viewed their government. The events surrounding Watergate remain a pivotal chapter in the story of American democracy, and to this day, it serves as a warning about the abuse of power and the importance of checks and balances. In this video, we'll break down what happened, how it unfolded, and the key players who were involved in one of the darkest moments in American politics.
The break-in at Watergate. It all began on the night of June 17, 1972, when 5 men were arrested after breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. The men were caught attempting to wiretap phones and steal documents from the DNC offices. The burglars weren't exactly amateurs. They were connected to the Committee to Re-elect the President, or CRP, a group working to secure President Richard Nixon's re-election in 1972. At first, the break-in seemed like just another bizarre crime, and the media didn't immediately grasp its significance. But as reporters dug deeper, they uncovered a shocking truth. The break-in was part of a much larger conspiracy involving the Nixon administration, a cover-up and a web of deceit that would eventually unravel the president's entire political career.
The cover-up begins. As the investigation into the break-in grew, it was discovered that the Nixon White House had been involved in the cover-up. Nixon's aides, including H.R. Haldeman, his chief of staff, and John Ehrlichman, his domestic policy advisor, were deeply involved in orchestrating efforts to suppress information and obstruct justice. They worked to ensure the FBI's investigation was shut down, and they even made payments to the burglars to keep them quiet. One of the most critical figures in exposing the scandal was John Dean, the White House counsel. Initially, Dean had been part of the cover-up, but he eventually turned against Nixon. In a series of testimony before Congress, Dean revealed that Nixon had been involved in the cover-up from the very beginning. He claimed that Nixon had discussed the efforts to obstruct justice, leading to a massive public outcry and further investigation.
Hey, Nixon tapes. The scandal took an even darker turn when it was revealed that Nixon had secretly recorded conversations in the Oval Office. These recordings, known as the Nixon tapes, were crucial pieces of evidence that would eventually lead to his downfall. For months, the White House had denied the existence of such tapes, but when the recordings were finally uncovered, they proved that Nixon had been aware of the cover-up and had even participated in it. The tapes revealed startling conversations between Nixon and his aides, discussing how to silence potential witnesses, manipulate the investigation, and cover up the entire operation. One of the most damning tapes featured a conversation between Nixon and Haldeman, where they discussed using the CIA to stop the FBI from investigating the break-in.
The Senate Watergate hearings. In May 1973, as pressure mounted on Nixon and his administration, the Senate Watergate Committee was formed to investigate the scandal. The hearings were televised, and millions of Americans watched as key figures testified about their involvement in the break-in and cover-up. The hearings became a media sensation and exposed the extent of the corruption in the Nixon White House. During the hearings, John Dean testified in front of the committee and implicated Nixon in the cover-up. He told the Senate that Nixon had been a central figure in the effort to block the FBI's investigation, and he claimed that Nixon had ordered the payments to the burglars to keep them quiet. The testimony from Dean and other witnesses painted a picture of a White House willing to do anything to protect Nixon's political future, including breaking the law and undermining democratic institutions.
The impact of the tapes. By the summer of 1974, the investigation had reached a critical point. The Senate committee had gathered enough evidence to call for Nixon's impeachment. But the most crucial evidence still lay in the Nixon tapes. The question was, would Nixon release the tapes to the public? Under intense pressure, Nixon agreed to hand over some of the tapes to the special prosecutor investigating the scandal, Archibald Cox. However, the tapes were heavily edited, and many key sections were missing. The public was outraged, and calls for Nixon's resignation grew louder. In October 1973, the Saturday Night Massacre occurred. Nixon ordered the firing of Archibald Cox, who had demanded the release of the tapes. This led to the resignation of both Attorney General Elliot Richardson and Deputy Attorney General William Ruckelshaus, who refused to carry out Nixon's orders. The firing of Cox and the ensuing controversy intensified the pressure on Nixon, and the scandal only deepened.
Nixon resigns. By the summer of 1974, the writing was on the wall. With mounting evidence of wrongdoing, the U.S. House of Representatives began drafting articles of impeachment against Nixon. The articles accused him of obstruction of justice, abuse of power, and contempt of Congress. Public opinion was firmly against him, and even many members of his own party turned against him. On August 8, 1974, in the face of imminent impeachment and the real possibility of being removed from office, Richard Nixon announced his resignation. He became the first U.S. president in history to resign from office. The next day, Gerald Ford, his vice president, was sworn in as the 38th president of the United States.
The aftermath. The resignation of Nixon didn't end the scandal, however. The fallout from Watergate continued for years. Nixon's aides, including Haldeman, Ehrlichman, and Dean, were convicted and sentenced to prison for their roles in the cover-up. One of the most controversial acts in the aftermath of Watergate was President Ford's decision to pardon Nixon for any crimes he may have committed while in office. The pardon sparked intense debate and led many to question whether justice had truly been served.
Conclusion. The Watergate scandal is one of the most consequential events in U.S. political history. It exposed the dangers of unchecked political power and the lengths to which those in power will go to protect their interests. It also showed the resilience of American democracy, the fact that the system was able to hold the president accountable, even when it seemed like the odds were against it. Though Richard Nixon resigned in disgrace, the lessons of Watergate continue to shape American politics today. It serves as a reminder that no one, not even the president, is above the law, and it underscores the importance of transparency, accountability, and the rule of law in safeguarding democracy.